Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. I'm Boris Tizengauzen. Today is November 10th and we have a packed episode ahead. So in this episode, the Russian port of Tuapse is under attack again. Fuel exports through Russia's Black Sea ports are under threat. The investigation into the Nordstream explosions threatens to split support for Ukraine. The birthday of the designer Kalashnikov, the Soviet legend versus reality. So who really invented the famous assault rifle? Patriarch Kirill has dismissed the metropolitan for playing poker. And a big, I would even say grand scandal. The BBC leadership is resigning over a story about Donald Trump. All this and more in today's episode. There will be plenty more interesting things to come. So if you're new to the channel, now is the perfect time to subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes. Last night, unmanned boats attacked the Russian city of Tuapse. Local public pages are reporting this, saying that the attack targeted the terminal. Let me remind you, there's an oil terminal there and various tankers are refueled with Russian oil. And after the previous attack, which took place on November 2nd and was an airstrike, fuel exports through that port were suspended. And as for the Tuapse oil refinery, which belongs to Rosneft, it has completely halted processing. This is because the port infrastructure was damaged. And at that time, ships were moved away from the docks there. This terminal has a capacity of actually a bit more than 10 million tons of oil products transshipped per year. It operates and is supplied by the Omsk and Samara group of oil refineries, and of course by the Tuapse oil refinery as well. This port of Tuapse is a very critical point, and I have repeatedly said that the death of Koshchei, that is, Putin's death, is actually in the ports. If the export infrastructure is destroyed, then where will the money for the war come from? For 25 years, Russia hasn't come up with anything except selling oil and using that money to wage war. And a second attack on this port should firmly cement in the minds of those loading oil there, I mean foreign companies, that this business is dangerous. Do you want to take the risk? Then significantly increase your insurance costs. Go ahead, look for it. Find some reckless adventurers who are willing to bring tankers there. So, in general, physically destroying the infrastructure is good, but adding on top of that a psychological effect, don't mess with Russian ports, is also good, doubly so. And one of the Russian warships was damaged. They are currently clarifying the details of which one exactly. In short, the unmanned boats did their job. And now the Wall Street Journal publishes a piece saying that the investigation into who is actually behind the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines threatens to fracture support for Ukraine. At first, I didn't understand how this could cause a split, but it turns out that such an opinion exists. German investigators consider Kiev responsible for the explosions, or more precisely, the former commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Zaluzhny. And quoting German police, prosecutors, and other informed sources claim that they have managed to piece together a clear picture of how an elite Ukrainian military unit carried out the bombings under the direct command of then Commander General Valery Zaluzhny. According to Wall Street Journal sources, the German investigation believes the saboteurs' goal was clearly to deprive Russia of oil and gas revenues and to weaken its economic ties with other countries. Then let me remind you that suspects have been detained in Europe. And there are concerns that a trial will begin in Germany. Any legal proceedings will further complicate relations between Ukraine and Germany. At the moment, Germany is the largest financial donor to Kiev and probably the main supplier of the most in-demand weapon systems, especially air defense systems. Well, what can I say? Let's put it this way. Why, during World War II, no one ever really thought, I don't know, to actually hold the United States accountable for bombing the vital oil infrastructure that supplied essential fuel to the German Wehrmacht military forces, right? Why is that? Operation Tidal Wave was an air raid carried out by US Air Force bombers. They were based in Libya and southern Italy. They bombed 10 oil refineries in the area of the city of Ploiești, that's in Romania, were bombed so that these plants wouldn't supply fuel to the Wehrmacht. They wanted these Axis countries to stop receiving fuel supplies. How is the situation different now? I recall the statement by the Polish leadership who said that those who blew up the Nord Streams are heroes, real heroes. So why don't we condemn it then? Back then the bombings took place on Romanian territory. If there's anyone in Germany who really deserves a more active investigation, it's former Chancellor Schröder. Let me remind you, there is an ongoing investigation into him. He was the one, together with Angela Merkel, who pushed through these Nordstream pipelines. He was the one who planned to get all of Europe, especially Germany, hooked on these oil pipelines. He practically threw himself on the grenade for them. Here's a brief chronology, literally just a few lines. Schröder, the fable of Schröder and the pipeline. So, magical coincidences. The luckiest man on earth, Gerhard Schröder. He was Chancellor from 1998 to 2005. September 2005. Just a few weeks before stepping down as Chancellor, Schröder signs an agreement between Gazprom and a German company to build a gas pipeline along the bottom of the Baltic Sea. Just a few months later, on November 22nd of that same year, 2005, he leaves his position. And in December 2005, literally, right away, almost immediately after stepping down, he is appointed chairman of the shareholders committee of which company, do you think? Nordstream. It was based in Switzerland and controlled by Gazprom, and he felt just fine there all the way until 2017. In 2017, he was elected to the board of directors of Rosneft at Putin's personal suggestion. What a coincidence, what a lucky guy. In 2019, he became the chairman of the board of directors of Nord Stream 2. See how things turn out. The second pipeline as well, which is also controlled by Gazprom. And then in 2022, after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, he naturally came under political and public pressure. He was stripped of some of the privileges of a former chancellor, and in May 2022, he stated that he did not intend to give up his personal ties with Putin. They really did become close, didn't they? But he left the board of directors of Rosneft. I think he definitely didn't get lost. How does that even happen, huh? And the country that was literally given 2 weeks, I remind you, Ukraine was given a couple of weeks and it would fall. Well, Russia is such a giant, but Ukraine is chasing Russia all over the world. And to cut off one of the wallets, which were these Nord Streams, that's protection, that's defense. And now it turns out they're being judged. In fact, these performers should be given hero status. By the way, no one has proven anything. We don't know anything. It wasn't us. Against the backdrop of falling oil profits, Russia has started whining again that they want peace. So now, when sanctions are looming, they want peace. And Peskov came out and said that Moscow would like the conflict in Ukraine to end as soon as possible. It would seem simple. Just withdraw your troops from the internationally recognized territory of Ukraine, which you Russians have also recognized. And you gave Ukraine security guarantees, its territorial integrity and sovereignty, in exchange for transferring nuclear weapons under the Budapest Memorandum. If you want, just get out of Ukraine faster. What's the issue? What's the problem? You have nothing there. Putin just wants a piece of Ukrainian land to bring it in his black beak to the Russians, to call and say, look what I got. That was the goal of the war, even though Russia has 17 million square kilometers of its own territory, of which, attention, 8 million square kilometers are uninhabited. So why are you opening your jaws for more? And Peskov added that it will end. Well, Peskov says, we would like this conflict to end sooner, but it can only end when Russia achieves the objectives it set from the beginning. Which objectives? To capture all of Ukraine? What were you doing near Kiev? Why did you land paratroopers in Hostomel? I recently watched an interview with those Russian paratroopers who survived. One of them said, well, the plan was that we land in Hostomel, then quickly the transport planes arrive, we swiftly capture Kiev, take over Bankova Street, get everyone out, and so on. So that's what the real plan was. It only changed later when they were chased out of here with a kick. So what exactly were those objectives? Does anyone actually know or have a clear understanding of what specific goals or objectives President Putin set for this war? Go ahead, ask Lavrov, ask Peskov, ask Putin. List all the objectives point by point. I remember denazification, demilitarization. Nowadays, no one even mentions those two words anymore. What objectives did you set? No one will list them, because it's standard practice in the Russian Federation not to specify anything, so that later you can fit anything you want into vague wording. And by the way, Peskov also pointed out that the negotiations on Ukraine stalled not because of Russia. Oh no, of course it's Ukraine's fault, which just refuses to surrender. They just won't, no matter what. Ukraine just keeps treacherously defending itself. How could this be? Friends, let me remind you about the important fundraiser we're running.
Апарат штучної вентиляції легень – незамінна річ для надання невідкладної допомоги в умовах бойових дій. Ми в першому окремому медичному батальйоні використовуємо спеціальні портативні системи забезпечення для використання у військових умовах. Це найкращий інструмент, але, на жаль, він не призначений для такого навантаження та роботи в безперебійному режимі, яка є в наших умовах зараз. Тому ці системи починають виходити з ладу. Через це ми потребуємо додаткових звичайних стаціонарних апаратів ШВЛ. Залишитися без них не можна, адже це призведе до серйозних наслідків. Вартість одного апарату – 730 тисяч гривень, а всього потреба є у 8. Разом з каналом Бориса Тізенгаузена збираємо на другий ШВЛ для передових хірургічних груп першого окремого медичного батальйону. Часу обмаль. Розраховуємо на вашу підтримку.
This is exactly the case when your donation directly saves lives. Medics are true guardian angels. They risk their own lives to save the lives of Ukraine's defenders. They are truly wonderful people. The link to donate is in the description of this video. There's Mono, Private, and PayPal for those who want to help from abroad. I see all of you, and to each of you personally, I want to say a huge thank you. Together we are a great force, and right now our defenders and combat surgeons need our help. Well, if you don't see it in the description for some reason, there's always a QR code. You can use that too. And thank you so much, friends. Now, moving from good people to, let's put it mildly, not so good people, to scoundrels. Patriarch Kirill fired Metropolitan Nestor for his fondness for poker. He was the exarch of Western Europe, and recently this Metropolitan Nestor took part in poker tournaments. There are photos of him sitting there with cards in his hands wearing a white shirt. In the Czech Republic, French specialized publications are calling him an intellectual player. He won about 50,000 euros there, but I'm thinking maybe the priest just hit a pretty big jackpot and didn't share it with Kirill. That's the point. In the name of the straight, the flush, and the holy flop, all in, so to speak, for supporting the war. That's why I singled out this news and I'm talking about it today. They don't strip someone of their rank for supporting the war. Let me remind you, Patriarch Kirill called the war that Putin started a holy war. He offered his blessing to those ghouls, those individuals who came all the way here to Ukraine, as he described it, for what he called a truly heroic deed. And he claimed that those who die in this war will receive forgiveness of their sins. This is where, as they say, Patriarch Kirill is hiding in the details. This is where the evil, in fact, has hidden itself. Blessing weapons that then kill innocent people in Ukraine, children, the elderly, that's considered normal. But poker, as they say, is a bit too much. Well, in general, this news says a lot about Russia, about Putin's Russia. And here's a piece of news I definitely couldn't ignore, a major scandal involving the BBC and Donald Trump. The BBC leadership is resigning after a dispute over editing they did in a film about Donald Trump. The Director General of the British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC, announced yesterday that he is resigning. And Deborah Turness is also resigning from her position. She is currently serving as the head of BBC News, which is the main news division of the British Broadcasting Corporation. The situation escalated to the point where it started to damage the reputation of the entire BBC corporation, so a decision was made. Even though the director had worked in the organization for over 20 years, a real veteran. These resignations occurred after the Telegraph published details about a leaked internal BBC memo which stated that the program Panorama, which aired a documentary about Donald Trump, had edited 2 parts of his speech. And it seemed that the video was edited in such a way that it appeared as if Trump was calling to attack the Capitol. This leak came out, and now I'll tell you the details. There's a very, very interesting point that surfaced. The leak came from Michael Prescott, a former independent freelance advisor to the Editorial Standards Committee. He immediately left this position because his opinion regarding this film was not taken into account. And the film Trump, Second Chance, was released about Trump coming back for a second term as president. It was broadcast last year, produced by the BBC and another production company. So it turns out that when they edited a lot of archival material, including Donald Trump's speeches, even on the day of the Capitol storming, they took that speech and spliced it in such a way that they cut out fragments and combined them to make it seem as if Donald Trump was calling on people to go and take the Capitol, just like Lenin called on people to take the Winter Palace. So this independent expert, even before the film was released, Mr. Prescott wrote a note. He said, listen, what is it that you've edited together here? He said, this worries me. You shouldn't do this kind of editing. And he passed on this note. No one responded. They saw it and wrote back to leave everything as it is. And after that, Mr. Prescott stated that all the standards and internal control mechanisms had stopped working, and he resigned. He was right. No one listened to him. He pointed out blatant manipulation. And the scandal flared up again. Well, it didn't just flare up again. It literally exploded just the other day when someone leaked that note to the Telegraph. Who could it have been, I wonder? Who was it that wanted justice, huh? Well, I think, though I wasn't there with Mr. Presk, I can't say for sure, but he could have at least hinted to someone or passed it along. So that's how it is. So the conclusions from all of this, oh, and now Donald Trump is on top. So the Anglo-Saxon attackers, they're always attacking me. I won. The BBC leadership is leaving. They admitted that they were fabricating, well, something bad. They edited things together to smear me. I won. Donald Trump is always calling everyone fake news, and here it turned out that he won. Trump is openly defeating the British media. Well, this is serious. They got caught, said Donald Trump. This is a devastating precedent for Western media. It's a precedent in general, and I think the consequences will be very serious. In an era when trust in the media is already declining, neutrality is practically a vanishing luxury. So this isn't just an editorial mistake. This is a blow to the symbol of the Western media system. The BBC is a giant, and now they've been caught like this. Well, politics has long since turned into a market of emotions, not ideas. For some reason, the media, which have their own standards and oversight organizations, react like this. Well, there is still an institution of reputation for now. People leave, obviously, so that the company itself doesn't take the hit. But the fact is, what is not allowed for the media is always allowed for politicians. You see, they're in different weight classes. Can a politician lie? Easily. Can they break their promise? Easily. I mean, of course, as long as they're not lying under oath. Even then, there are countries where you can lie both under oath and not under oath. In general, being honest in politics is an instant loss. Instantly, immediately. An honest person says, it will be hard, it will take years, we'll have to save money. Then a liar comes along and says, I'll do everything in a month, actually, in 24 hours, just vote for me. No one will suffer, everything will be great, everyone will get more, bad people will get less, and everyone will be happy. And that's it, he wins, because it's easier for people to believe in something convenient rather than something real. If lying makes your ratings go up, then let lies become your strategy, right? Complex answers no longer win. They have never won elections. I think many have noticed how many outright populists and showmen are bursting into politics right now. With the development of social networks and artificial intelligence, I think this percentage will be even higher. And that's how it happens. The information filter has been destroyed. Previously, a politician had to go through journalists, give interviews, attend press conferences. Now all you need is a phone and TikTok. TikTok, Telegram, no one checks anything. You can post as much as you want. And by the way, people aren't really looking for the truth. They never have. They're looking for a simple explanation, and that's exactly what populists take advantage of. You're poor? Well, that means your competitors are to blame. There are no roads? Well, that means our neighbors are at fault. The destruction of the institution of reputation, a complete reset, happens when a politician sees that lying goes unpunished, and on the contrary is even rewarded. It's just like, in any game, if you're a cheater, if you cheat, for example, in a game like Monopoly, right? You just turn the dice away from your opponent, flip it to whatever you need, say a 6 or a 5, steal some cards. So if you play dirty, you win. It's the same in politics. You don't need to be a super expert to understand that In just a couple of decades, the amount of information we consume has increased many times over. Many times over. I mean, before it was just a newspaper, maybe a couple of TV channels, but now terabytes are pouring in from Telegram, from TikTok, from all sorts of audiovisual content. If before the very format of information changed, yes, the format itself changed, you read much less now, I'm pretty sure of that. You watch more. It's neither good nor bad, it's just a fact of our time and technology. I mean, now your TV fits right here in your hand. And you can watch whatever you want, rewind, speed things up, and so on. So, for example, you can listen to Tizengauzen in the background for half an hour on your way to work, or home, or while having a cup of tea. You can speed it up. So it's... By the way, don't forget to subscribe. I caught myself thinking that lately I listen to audiobooks more often than I read. In Europe, in the US, by the way, there was just a podcast boom about 10 years ago, maybe a little earlier. It's strange that it hasn't reached us on such a scale yet, but the trend is clear. An average American adult, according to Edison statistics I looked up, spends about 20 minutes reading and 80 minutes listening. That's the average data. Audiovisual content, voice is presence. It's the feeling that someone has spoken to you. I don't know what kind of content will come next in this era, but I think it will be something completely new based on artificial intelligence. But we'll see. By the way, you can write your own ideas in the comments. That's exactly how our section was intended. Yes, sorry, I got distracted by these. Sometimes I get carried away. That's exactly how our section was intended. Putin has decided to make a deal with Modi for the mass import of workers from India to Russia. Welcome. Russia is planning to sign an agreement on, well, they'll start with 100,000 and then, appetite comes with eating. What happened, one wants to ask? And how did it happen that Putin has already probably killed about 1,200,000 Russians in this war? And now he says, let's replace them with citizens of India and Pakistan. Let them come work for us. So who is Russia's main enemy, I wonder? Russians. Have you ever thought about that? And now this other scoundrel has crawled out. Someone you could probably put on the same line as Putin. Medvedchuk, that's Putin's crony, a former Ukrainian MP, just an utterly disgusting person. And he came out with some new article and decided to claim that the West has decided to breed a new type. Ukrainians bred to destroy Russians, that's how it turns out. Apparently, Western countries have organized an artificial selection of Ukrainians, whose task is to destroy Russians, or so Medvedchuk claims. Well, look, that's exactly why Russians, when no one was bothering them at all, we hadn't even bred this new type yet. There was only the old type. The new one hadn't even been created yet. That's exactly why they cross the border in tanks and come to destroy us. They are destroying entire settlements, wiping cities off the face of the earth. That's exactly why. So that, God forbid, we don't breed some new kind of Ukrainians. They're just sick over there. They're completely out of their minds. Some kind of artificial selection forbidding them to remember their history. They create a fake church for them. Artificial Ukrainians, artificial culture. Listen, this Medvedchuk, he's the very one of those who convinced Putin that everything would be fine, that Kyiv would be taken in 3 days, that Ukrainians would greet them with flowers. So why didn't they? Interesting. Was it the wrong kind or what? Did something go wrong? Medvedchuk turned out to be useful for the first and only time in his life. In other words, he did a good deed. That was when he was exchanged for our Ukrainian heroes. Let me remind you, at that time they exchanged 40-something Russian occupiers plus Medvedchuk for 215 of our fighters. Among them were 108 Azov members, including Azov commanders. They stayed in Turkey for some time afterward. But as soon as Medvedchuk ended up in Russia, he started doing what he does best, causing trouble for all normal countries. To begin with, he and his partners launched the information platform Voice of Europe, through which they tried to bribe European politicians to stop helping Ukraine. They got caught doing this, and now there are criminal cases underway in Europe. In short, an investigation is ongoing. He also organized the platform Other Ukraine. Under its roof, he brought together all the fugitive traitors from Ukraine. And they sit there trying to present some kind of alternative reality about Ukraine for Moscow. In short, he's a rare kind of parasite. It feels like he won't die a natural death. Especially since, as you know, the Ukrainian Mossad will find everyone, and especially this scum. Another piece of news. As long as Trump is president, and as long as I'm prime minister here, there will be no sanctions against Hungary, said Orban. In fact, Donald Trump is now doing everything he can to help Orban win the elections that will take place in Hungary in April next year. It's not certain that he'll win, but it's significant support. So why can't other countries ask Donald Trump for an exception? Orban had almost 4 years to diversify the risks. Instead, Hungary not only didn't reduce its purchases of Russian energy resources, but actually increased them. And now he's like, here I am, as long as Trump is there and I'm here, I'll keep buying Russian oil. Well, you know, there's another ethnic Hungarian with the call sign Magyar. He's the commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces. I think he'll give Orban some guidance on whether or not he'll be buying Russian oil. By the way, today in Russia they're celebrating the birthday of in their opinion, great weapons designer Mikhail Kalashnikov, whose creation, the Kalashnikov rifle, even appears on the flag of some African countries. Well, Kalashnikov and his invention are just one of the myths of the Soviet Union, like Pavka Korchagin, Pavlik Morozov, and all those Panfilov heroes. So who actually created the Kalashnikov rifle? Well, the story is just remarkable. And it's very short at the end of our program, so it'll just take a couple of minutes. So, the Soviet legend says that Kalashnikov, who was born into a large family as the 17th child, was interested in technology from childhood, had a 7th grade education, saw a locomotive for the first time at age 17, but in 1930 the Kalashnikov family was dispossessed and exiled to the Omsk region. Soviet biographers preferred not to mention this. Well, alright. So, before the war, Kalashnikov worked in the field of weapon development. Let me remind you, he had no higher education, he couldn't read blueprints, he had a 7th grade education. So, Kalashnikov supposedly worked in the field of weapon development without any of this. Before the war, he created a submachine gun of an unsuccessful design, so the conclusion was not to adopt it into service. They were of no industrial interest. Then Kalashnikov's biographers report that in 1942 he worked at a testing range. And suddenly in 1947 Kalashnikov simply creates the famous assault rifle from scratch. This is the Kalashnikov rifle. Before that it was just some kind of stick with, you know how we used to make toy guns as kids? Out of clothespins, acorns, matches, electrical tape, and all sorts of other things. And then suddenly, boom, the Kalashnikov rifle. So what happened during that time when Kalashnikov suddenly created this rifle in Ijevsk? Well, let me remind you, in 1947 Kalashnikov created it, and in 1945 Nazi Germany capitulated. And from the city of Suhl, the Soviet leadership took out part of the equipment and documentation from the weapons factory of the Heinl company, and everything related to the production of the German assault rifle STG-44 was taken out, which by some miracle looks very much like the Kalashnikov rifle. In addition to the equipment, the Soviet leadership also took the German gunsmiths led by Hugo Schmeisser. Where? To Ijevsk. They were taken to Ijevsk, where they began their work. What exactly did they do there? Well, that remains unspoken. In fact, an entire German design bureau was relocated. There are photographs, there is a house where they lived. The locals were very upset that these Germans were living there, and in such conditions too. Here is the house at 133 Krasnaya Street. This is how the German designers lived there until 1952. Still, this guy, who had no education at all, I even watched some footage with Kalashnikov, he was really not very bright, he couldn't even string 2 words together properly. And another interesting detail is that Kalashnikov never improved his weapon afterwards because he said it was already perfect and there was nothing to improve. Yes, history, Soviet history, holds many secrets, but sooner or later we will learn about them. Sooner or later we will find out who in Europe worked for the Soviet Union, for the KGB, and later for the FSB. We will find out. I think it will be a huge revelation. And as for you friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and subscribe to this channel. And let's help our medics, our combat medics, our angels and guardians. The link for the fundraiser is in the description of this video. Wishing us all a peaceful day and glory to Ukraine.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.